This is lesson 3, starting at page 230 in your textbook pages. We're going to talk about how Punnett squares are used to predict patterns in heredity. We know that Gregor Mendel studied pea plants, and he's the one that originally noticed that there were inherited traits that came in patterns. And so he didn't actually create the Punnett square, but he did, his studies were what caused later the Punnett square to be used. It's a graphic that's used to predict possible genotypes of the offspring in a given cross. And if you know the genotypes, then of course you can figure out what the actual physical characteristics are, the phenotype. So each parent's got 2 alleles, just like the mom had red and green for wagon wheels and dad had blue and yellow for wagon wheels traits. Those were for a particular gene. The offspring gets 1 allele, or one of those, from each parent. So the Punnett square lists all the possible allele combinations. So each square actually represents a possible combination of genes in an offspring. So the parents are written at the top and the side. Doesn't matter if you put the dad here or the dad here, just so long as only one letter is written above each column or beside each row. And so if they tell you that a parent is homozygous recessive, homozygous means same, recessive means small letters, so you would have 2 small letters for that parent. If they say they're heterozygous, you'll have 1 capital and 1 lowercase. And so when we look at each of these squares, each one represents an offspring. So this might be the characteristics in one offspring. This might be the characteristics, possibilities in another offspring. So possible 4 combinations. So in the Punnett square, where are the parent alleles written? They're written on the top and on the side. And so we're going to flip over to some practice. And these are pea plants, exactly what Gregor Mendel studied. It says round pea is dominant and a wrinkled pea is recessive. And so if they gave us this picture, that's the phenotype. And so the phenotype here is it appears to be round, but I want to make sure, so I look, here is my genotype, capital R, little r. And I know that dominant overshadows everything else, so if dominant is round, then this is going to be a round pea, or it's going to appear physically as a round pea without any wrinkles. And so then I take the same thing. I'm working backwards now. So instead of them giving me the genotype and I put it into the Punnett square, they gave me the Punnett square and I'm filling out the genotype. So capital R and lowercase r. And this also is a round pea without any wrinkles. Now I'm going to take this dominant trait and put it here, and this dominant trait and put it there. This lowercase I'm going to put here, and this lowercase I'm going to put there. Now I'm going to go from the side. This parent has a dominant trait, and so I'm going to move it to here. I could have put it in front of it. It doesn't really matter. Most of the time you will see the capital letter written first. Now, genotype is actually what's in the box, so it's kind of repetitive here. So I'm going to copy that back down here to show that I know that genotype is that. And I'm going to then decide what do these look like. 2 dominant or homozygous dominant for round is of course going to be a round pea, no question, right? But 1 of each, I've got to remember dominant wins out, so it's also going to be round. And then 1 dominant, 1 recessive, this is going to be round. And this is 2 recessive, so my wrinkled pea allele is recessive, so this one is going to be wrinkled. And if I were to analyze, what does each compartment of the Punnett square represent? Well, it represents an offspring possibility. And if I were to analyze, there are 3 round phenotype to every 1 wrinkle. I could say there is 1 dominant homozygous to 2 heterozygous to 1 dominant recessive homozygous. So those are all the possibilities that I could get from there. To page 232, how can the Punnett square be used to make predictions about the offspring? They say this is a 1 to 4 is the ratio of red squares to total squares. So blue square ratio would be 3 to 4. So we have more chance of getting blue than we do of getting red. And so when the Punnett square doesn't tell you the exact results of a certain cross, it doesn't tell you what the exact results will be. This is just possibilities or probability. It's a mathematical chance of a specific outcome in relation to the total number of possible outcomes. It can be expressed as a ratio, an expression that compares two quantities. A ratio is written like 1:4 is read as 1 to 4. The ratio obtained from a Punnett square will tell you the probability that one offspring will get a certain alleles. You could also represent this as a percentage. Percentage is like a ratio that compares to a number of 100. We sometimes use a fraction, right? 1 out of 4 is 25%. So in this, they tell us that guinea pigs, fur color, dominant capital B represents black fur. The recessive trait is brown fur. And they want you to use the Punnett square to find the probability of the cross resulting in brown fur. So capital B, little b is the one parent, little b is the other parent. Now they didn't tell us this, but we know if dominant is black, and there is a dominant trait here, this parent has black fur. And then this parent, because it has two recessive traits, has brown fur. So they didn't actually draw the guinea pig's parent, but we could figure it out. And so they do give us pictures of the offspring. And so we have this bee written here and this bee there. And so when we go across, we have 2 out of the 4 guinea pigs that had black fur and 2 out of the 4 guinea pigs that had brown fur. Now this is just an example. There's nothing for you to solve. They just want to see, what do you know? Well, you know the parent genotypes are capital B and little b, and then 2 recessive Bs. You know the possible offsprings. What do you want to find out? Well, you want to find out the probability of an offspring getting brown fur. So first you count the total number of combinations. And so that's 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes. Count the allele combinations that result in brown fur, 1, 2. So we would write the probability of the offspring having brown fur is 2 to 4. You could rewrite it as what out of 100, so that would be 50 out of 100 is equivalent to 2 out of 4. You could also change that to 50% chance that you'll get brown fur. If you need help with what you're supposed to do, you're going to look back to this page while you solve this one. And so here they've told us, this time they're crossing heterozygous parent with a heterozygous parent. And if we had to figure out what does this heterozygous parent look like, we know that one dominant trait for black fur means that the organism has black fur. So this parent has black fur. And we know that this is also heterozygous, so this parent also has black fur. If we wanted to color or draw it, we could. So now we're going to start with identify. What do you know? We know the parent, both parents, genotype is capital B, little b, and black fur. We know their phenotype. And what are we wanting to find out? They asked us, what's the possibility of cross resulting in an offspring with black fur? And so that's what we want to find out. What's the probability of the cross resulting in offspring with black fur? And we can count the total number of offspring as being 4. We can count the allele combinations that will result in an offspring with black fur. Here we got 1, 2, 3. So we have 3 out of 4. And we could rewrite that as 75 out of 100, or 75%. Now, they want us to create a graph at the bottom, a pie graph, showing the ratio of each possible genotype. Now, genotype is not the same as phenotype, okay? And so when we look at this Punnett square, We know that we could divide it into 4 parts, right? Because there's 4 possibilities. And one of those parts would be capital B, capital B. And 2 of those parts would be heterozygous. And then finally 1 would be lowercase, lowercase. And so we would fill in with a corresponding color whatever we wanted those to be. Maybe we could just do a pattern. We could say these would be striped, or let's do them plaid. These would be plaid, these would be white, these would be dark. I mean, you could fill it in. So this is dark, this is plaid, and this is blank. And so that's how you would make a pie chart for that.